Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I don't know if I should call this a regular episode of Bucs in the Basement or if this is minor league news without the bruise, but it is our 2024 Pirates draft review, bringing in for the fourth year in a row. We decided beforehand we were going to call it 5 because I was on the old Prospect Live show back in 2020. For the fourth time here, Joe Doyle at Joe Doyle MILB, the New Balance Future Star Series, the at FSS_plus, doing all the mock drafts. I was reading up on them again this morning. Joe, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good, brother. It's good to be back. You know, it's year 5 of being on some sort of stream or podcast or venture with you. Feels like I've grown up with you, man. How you been, Craig?
Well, if you're growing up with me, I'm growing old. I'd have to look back at some of the videos to see how much gray was in that beard back in 2020. But this year for the Pirates isn't as exciting as it's been in the past. I mean, obviously last year, the discussions with Dylan Cruz, with Wyatt Langford, with Paul Skeens, I mean, really getting into that kind of stuff, it was exciting, but it doesn't mean that there isn't excitement about the draft because I've seen a decent amount of mock drafts, including your own, and seen the picks change, the reasoning for the picks change. So for people that haven't, tapped into the draft before or maybe not listened to us talk here together, the MLB draft isn't just about, okay, here's the top 10 prospects. The Pirates, they're picking 9th and they are going to get the 9th best prospect. So work out kind of how some of this stuff works at the top of the draft.
Man, the intricacies and the nuance of the Major League Baseball draft is why I got into it 6 or 7 years ago. I think it's the most unique draft experience that you will find in professional sports. And it all kind of begins with the bonus pool. Every team has a restricted, regulated amount of money that they can spend on signing bonuses to players. And because of that, it limits the amount of high school players that you can take because high school players have leverage. They can go to college. It limits, I shouldn't say it limits, but it forces teams to want to manipulate at the top of the draft. Who can we get that's willing to take $500,000 less than what the slot bonus for this pick is, so we can spend that $500,000 down the line on different players. And, the Pirates have done that in spades over the years, going under slot and landing some high school talent in the later rounds. Lonnie White, for example, we had just talked about. And I'm trying to remember the name of the 6'7" righty that they landed last year. That's been just money. It wasn't Chance Macko. What was his name?
Paul Skeens has been
not Paul
amazing.
Skeens. Not Paul Skeens, the high schooler.
Oh, the high schooler, Xander Meath.
Xander Meath. So, that's another perfect example. That's not a guy that ordinarily you'd be able to afford later in the draft. It is kind of funny that both of those guys are just mammoth righties. But no, to your point, Craig, the nuance of the draft is it's not, hey, who are we going to take here because he's the best player available? It's who can we take here that is also going to help us apply the best overall value in the draft. And then the other interesting wrinkle of it is, and everybody knows this, and it's why the draft isn't as popular in the mainstream, you're not going to see these guys for 2.5 years. Paul Skeens is the outlier. So yeah, it's a tremendously fun event for those of us that are really into it, but it's certainly a thought. It's a thought exercise.
Yeah, because basically, I mean, we've seen the number one pick, especially with the Pirates going back to 2021. That was the one you were referring to. That was the Henry Davis draft, and you were able to get Anthony Solomito, Lonnie White Jr., Bubba Chandler. And some of those guys, Henry's made it. He was, the college player within those ranks, so he obviously probably should make it first. 2022, we saw them draft Tamar Johnson and then Thomas Harrington out of Campbell University. And obviously last year was Paul Skeens and Mitch Jebb. Mitch Jebb, who is, kind of struggling in Greensboro at this point in time. But before we hopped on here, kind of going over, the Pirates' past drafts, and we were talking about that weird 2020 draft. Number 7 overall, Nick Gonzalez. Number 31 overall, Carmen Majinski, the right-hander out of South Carolina. And number 44, Jared Jones, the right-hander out of La Mirada High School in California. And all three of those guys, and I do realize that this is 2024, but to see a team that is able to have their first 3 draft picks from a draft in the majors and actually all make it to the majors, to me, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at that 2020 draft, I'm sure Pirates fans will look back at it and say Nick Gonzalez hasn't, been a top 10 pick value, but I, I would say that the Pirates had one of the 3 most valuable drafts in that draft. I mean, the Cardinals cleaned up. The Cardinals did great. The Texas Rangers did great. Beyond that, I mean, it might be the Pirates. Jared Jones has been phenomenal. Nick Gonzalez is finally turning into what Pirates fans in the industry hopes is a full-time regular at the big league level. Man, Craig, you look at the guys drafted in the top 10 of that class. Asa Lacy is still in Double-A. We don't know if he's ever going to play at the highest level. Emerson Hancock has been up and down. He's been injured. Zach Veen, injured. Austin Hendricks. These guys, it just didn't work that year for the vast majority of the draft picks. Spencer Torkelson back in AAA. So I think you kind of have to look at that draft from a 10,000-foot view and say, okay, yeah, maybe Nick Gonzalez from a conventional standpoint hasn't been quite the value that you wanted, but nobody got anything in that draft. It was absolutely brutal. So feather in the cap to the Pirates for landing 3 big leaguers, and 2 of them who could end up being pretty significant players in the next competitive Pirates team. And maybe that's 2024.
Yeah, I mean, Pirates fans are kind of hoping that it's 2024, but you got my hopes up a little bit with your 6.0 draft, the mock draft, is because I saw a guy from my team, from the West Virginia Mountaineers.
Oh,
Another Mars planet. I guess the Pirates would just be collecting, Mars planets at that point in time. JJ Weatherholt. JJ, injury in the offseason, injury into the beginning of the season. Towards the end of the season, we got to see the player that he could be. I mean, obviously, Pirates fans, they would say, okay, you're getting another, middle infielder. Don't we have enough middle infielders? We all know that's not what the draft is about. But talk to Pirates fans out there about what JJ could bring to the table for the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, JJ going back to February, at least for most outlets, myself included, was the number 1 prospect in the draft. I mean, it's elite contact rates. It is an elite approach. He never swings outside of the zone. He uses the pull side. He uses the opposite field. He's got natural loft in his swing. And I think maybe even more impressive, we all labeled him a second baseman. He hadn't really played shortstop too much, and this was going to be the year that he got that chance. When he finally recovered from that hamstring injury, and that hamstring injury kept him out from, that thing kept him out from July of 2023 until the middle of April this year after he re-aggravated it. When he finally got back, he was dynamic at shortstop. I mean, he's got a chance to play shortstop at the big league level. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be the best option for the team by any means. There should probably be a better option. The defender that I've compared him to is David Fletcher when David Fletcher was with the Angels. You can pass JJ Weatherholt by as a shortstop if you don't have another option, but you're buying the bat, you're buying a potential 25 home run, 285, 290 hitter, Jason Kipnis-esque type of production. Do I think he's going to be there at 9? In that mock, it was mostly just who is going to fall, who's going to slip. And I think we're all trying to figure that out. Is it going to be Braden Montgomery? Is it going to be Nick Kurtz? At that time, it was JJ Weatherholt. And I do think there's a chance that happens. But the more simulations that I run through, the more people that I talk to, I actually tend to think Pittsburgh is going to go with one of these high school hitters. And I could be wrong, but that's kind of where I'm pointed.
Pirates fans will absolutely lose their mind if it's a high school hitter. I'm just going to state that right now. I understand, what the draft could work out like, and that you could get, a college bat later on, different stuff like that. But I mean, and that's where like the MLB draft comes in, is you're not going to see these players for a while, no matter what. And no matter, what level they were playing at. But you mentioned somebody who is definitely on Pirates fans' radar, and that's Nick Kurtz. Obviously, in the MLB draft, you are not drafting for a position of need. But for Pirates fans, you look at first base, and it has been a complete black hole since maybe Kevin Young was out there. Maybe throw Josh Bell into that realm a little bit. But there's nobody, in line pushing up to Rowdy Tellez and Connor Joe at this point in time. And Kurtz does have the power. He does have the ability, the defensive ability to at least field the position fairly well. Talk about a contact guy, also make contact very well. But I look, is it possible that he could fall to the Pirates as well?
Yeah, and I actually think if there was one guy that you look at in that top 9 or top 11, if you want to include the high schoolers, I think Nick Kurtz is the most likely to fall to number 9. I do know that he's got some love in Oakland. He's got some love in Kansas City. The more I talk to people, the more it seems like those two teams are going to go in a different direction. I mean, I've talked to some teams that are preparing for the outcome, the chance that he could be there 14, 15, 16, 17. He does have a shoulder injury. He separated his shoulder, hyperextended his shoulder this year. And I think, teams would like to see the medicals on that shoulder to see exactly where that stands. But if I were to pick one guy, I would think Nick Kurtz would be the guy that could be there at number 9. And I got to say, Craig, like just from an industry point of view, from like what I would do if I was Pittsburgh, I would just take the guy that I think is going to provide the most offensive value as quickly as possible. And I think that is Nick Kurtz. I think he could be a Pirate at the end of 2025. You look at what this team is and where they're at with Skeens and Jones, and they've got Ashcraft coming in, all these other arms that they've stockpiled. They've kicked open a window, right? So they've got to find a way to put up 4.25, 4.5 runs a game, because if they do, I think all of a sudden in 2025 you're talking about a potential 86 to 90 win team. And I think Nick Kurtz could contribute in that scenario. So there are other guys and maybe we're going to talk about these guys, Braden Montgomery and Christian Moore, that I do think makes some sense. There's more swing and miss concerns with those guys, but I think with Kurtz, you get the highest floor player in the draft who could move the quickest as well.
Yeah, and I was going to go that direction eventually, but I wanted to also kind of tail back to, you brought up some of the high school players, and those are guys that I have seen linked to the Pirates, especially Bryce Rainier. It seems to be that he is somebody that other teams have maybe fallen in love with to a degree. I see St. Louis out there at times, but there's other players out there as well. So let's talk about some of the high school guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 that really make sense for Pittsburgh at pick number 9, provided they don't do something really unique and go after a kid like Wyatt Sanford massively under slot at 9. I don't think that's going to happen. Rayner is the guy that comes up the most, and it should come as no surprise. Justin Horwitz comes over from the Boston Red Sox. He was based in Southern California. You look at all of the guys that they've taken over the years: Mikey Romero, Cutter Coffee, um, shoot, I'm forgetting another one of them, Marcelo Meyer. Like they're all Southern California high school shortstops. And so Bryce Rayner fits into that bucket. Now I know Justin Horowitz isn't running the draft by himself, but that is a connection that is hard to deny. Um, Premium defender, premium frame, 6'3". It is a 70 grade, a tick below O'Neal Cruz arm strength. I mean, it's a howitzer that will play shortstop. The thing with Rayner is it's been a little bit of a short runway. He struggled during the summer of 2023, but this spring he really showed out well in some different showcase events for Team USA. So I think that might have done enough for him to go in the top 10. My only issue with taking a high school player is, and I know you're always searching for the most value that you can possibly get in the draft, you're not going to see Bryce Rayner until maybe 2028, maybe late 2027. It doesn't really, help this Pirates team right now. And furthermore, I mean, Paul Skeens will be in his arbitration years by then. So I think that's something to consider. Connor Griffin is the other one. It's a little bit of the same. It's a premium frame, 6'4". He runs like a gazelle. There's bat speed. There's some weirdness in his swing. There's some hitches. It's a little bit stiff, but you can't find another player in this draft, and I mean the entire draft, that has the 5 tools that Connor Griffin does. There's pretty high variance with his profile. It's possible that he gets stuck at AA or AAA and just never gets there if he never hits. But those would be the 2 bats that I think Pittsburgh would be all over. The last guy I would bring up, I have heard connected to Pittsburgh. I don't know if they would go this route, but Cam Caminiti is a left-handed pitcher out of Arizona that they've certainly showed interest in. They've seen him quite a few times. They've been in to see him quite a few times in volumes. Lots of guys from the organization have been in. He's a lefty, up to 98, pretty polished, good changeup, can spin a breaking ball with shape. I would be surprised if Pittsburgh went the high school pitching route, just because it's not really their thing at the top of any one given draft. But, if they think that they're a pitching development factory in Pittsburgh, which they are kind of making a case that they are, and they believe Caminiti is the highest ceiling pitcher left on the board after Chase Burns and Hagen Smith come off, maybe it's something to just keep on your radar.
And I just kind of going on top of you just mentioned Burns and Hagen. Pirates fans once again would probably be ecstatic if those guys would fall, but I've seen a lot of at least with Burns, seeing that he's not going to fall past 3. But there's a lot of these declarations that are kind of made at this point in time. But also, you mentioned Braden Montgomery. I've seen James Tibbs at times.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 guys with, a decent amount of power. Braden Montgomery also, I mean, he does pitch a little bit too, but I don't think the Pirates would go that route with him, whatsoever. But like you said, would there be, like you said, a swing and miss issue? And I mean, I think the Pirates have enough guys with swing and miss issues at this point in time.
Well, not with Tibbs. Tibbs can really hit, but the thing that Braden Montgomery has that Tibbs doesn't is it's a mammoth arm. I mean, it is a huge arm. My only thing is, like, I look at PNC Park and I just think, how much value do you need to put in a guy with massive arm strength in right field? It's not the most demanding right field in baseball. It's a shorter porch. It's a smaller gap. Does he fit? Like, are you getting excess value by drafting Braden Montgomery for his arm strength, for his defense? You're probably wanting to buy the bat, right? And the other part of it is he's a switch hitter. He might have to bail on right-handed hitting. At that point, do you just take the more polished left-handed hitting outfielder in James Tibbs, maybe save $200,000, go underslot with Tibbs? Because I don't know if he has another landing spot until, I could see him going to Detroit, but I don't think he has another landing spot until Chicago at 14. At that point, I think maybe he makes a little bit more sense for an organization that's looking for a fast-moving offensive bat. And Tibbs' bat is going to move quicker at the pro level than Braden Montgomery's is. So 2 very different players, even though they play the same position. Are you buying the call it the star upside of Braden Montgomery? Because it is there. It's 70 grade, 40 home run upside. Or are you buying the the Michael Brantley-esque, James Tibbs, Cole Calhoun-esque guy that you can just plug into the 3-hole right away and get some production for? It's a good question.
Yeah, and we talk about like the college bats because has been a conversation about the college heavy nature of, especially with the bats at the beginning of this draft. And I was a two-part question here, I guess, like why do you think that is? And then also I've read somewhere and I've seen some discussions concerning either the bats or the balls in college baseball this year and them having maybe a little bit more life. So maybe should we kind of maybe tamper expectations at least right away with some of these college hitters?
I think 2024 has made it even more valuable that area scouts exist. You need someone in the seats that can identify what real bat speed is, because there are some guys in this draft that are going to get drafted near the top that are probably flubbing their exit velos a little bit. It's a very, very simple way to cheat in college baseball. Before the game starts, umpires review the bats, they weigh the bats, they go over the bats, they make sure that they're regulation, they put a sticker on it. It is quite easy to take a sticker off and put it onto a new bat. I'll just kind of leave it at that. In terms of the balls, I don't really have any intel as to whether or not the balls are juiced or if they're contributing at all. But I can tell you, regulating bats in college baseball has certainly been an issue, and the home run totals kind of speak for themselves. In terms of why we have so many bats at the top, it's just a coincidence. I mean, I think scouts and the industry would really prefer that there was more high school talent scattered throughout the top 20 prospects, but those players just don't exist this year, and it's also kind of tough to find premium college pitching talent when everywhere you look, everyone's got a 5.5 ERA. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And I'd say one last thing that is frustrating about this draft. There's so many first basemen. There's so many third basemen. There's so many left fielders. The best drafts, the most exciting drafts are the guys that have players up the middle. And for this class, it's Bazana, it's Weatherholt, it's Honeycutt. They're tougher to find, and it makes for a what some consider to be a slightly below average class.
Yeah. And before I let you out of here, the first we do have, we don't just have that number 9 pick. We also have, number, what is it, 37 and then number 47. And we had spoke about like a Carmen Majinski. Carmen Majinski, we picked at 31, and most scouts, at least during that draft, had him, somewhere near the top 20 of that. So, I mean, is there anybody that maybe might fall a little bit further than possibly expected that you may have in mind? And if not, I do see right now, I do like Dakota Jordan, the outfielder out of Mississippi State, who you have projected in your 6.0. I'd be happy with him as well. But do you see anybody that might be kind of falling at this point in time?
I don't know if I see anyone that's falling as much as I just kind of read the tea leaves about guys that fit better at the top of the second round or in comp round A. I personally think like I'm going to be pushing out another mock draft here next week as we approach the draft, and then I'll head down to Dallas. But I think it's going to be a high school pitcher. Like that would be my gut guess at 37. I think Dax Whitney out of Blackfoot, Idaho, is a pretty popular name circling around Pittsburgh. I think Bryce Meckage is another name that Pirates fans should be familiar with. And then I would also point to a couple of high schoolers that did not go to the combine that make for some intrigue. David Shields and Joey Oki are two high school arms that I think would make a lot of sense for Pittsburgh at that pick too. At the end of the day, like I think the team would really like to go under slot with the number 9 pick. It's frankly, with how the top 11 picks shake out, it's probably one of the worst spots to be to have leverage to go under slot. It's just the way that it works. But I would expect pick 37 to be a high schooler just with what Ben Charrington and that front office have done year over year over year. It's probably going to be someone that's more of an upside play.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to blame you. I said one more question, but what you said has had put one thing in my head here because I did go see the West Virginia Black Bears in the MLB Draft League play. Kids enjoyed it. It was a very, very hot day. I think it was like 94 degrees that day.
Ooh.
But I would ask you, how has like the MLB, like the draft combine and the MLB Draft League, how do you think that has influenced the draft? I think that before it was guys that had played in like, and it may still be to a degree in like the wood bat leagues, like the Cape, the Northwest League. Um, but how has that maybe changed the draft landscape a little bit?
I genuinely don't think that the draft league yet has changed much for the draft. I mean, it's mostly, we'll call it quote unquote overlooked guys that are projected to go in the 7th, 8th, ninth, 10th round ranges that are, maybe just looking to improve their stock a little bit. I think the biggest thing that the draft league has done is specifically for pitchers is if you are attending a school that isn't on the TrackMan data sharing service and you don't have numbers, you don't have TrackMan data, spin rate, pitch design, stuff like that, data that you can share with teams, getting on a TrackMan device for, 40 games or however long that season is incredibly advantageous because you can pop. In terms of the combine, I've been to the combine twice. I don't see much value at all in terms of the on-field performances, the drills, all that stuff. I've told other people this. One thing that I think is great about the combine is you can see 319 guys in a uniform next to one another and kind of point at like what's the 5-star guy look like? Who fills out a uniform? Who looks the part of a big leaguer? I think that's valuable, especially for the high school kids. And then the other part of it is, most of these teams did anywhere between 40 and I've talked to one scouting director that did 110 interviews at the combine with players, 110. So
Yeah.
that's really the best chance. It's the chance for a scouting director to sit down with a prospective draftee, get to know them a little bit, get to know how they tick. And unfortunately, as observers, we don't get visibility into that part of the combine. But really, I compared it to the winter meetings for scouting last week. I kind of think that's an apt description. It's a good chance for everybody in the scouting industry to go to one place at the same time. And it's a good opportunity for me to have a couple of coffees and beer with people that I talk to throughout the year.
That's a good thing, and I will say the worst thing that came out of the MLB Draft League for me is that my oldest son Carter liked the guy's name. His name is Max Bushyhead. He is a Oklahoma commit, and so the worst thing could be is that my son becomes an Oklahoma Sooners baseball fan, as a West Virginia baseball fan myself, but. Joe, it's been great talking to you again, man. It's always once a year, but I do look forward to this. For those of you that don't, follow Joe at Joe Doyle at MILB. And if you can, you do need to do and subscribe to the New Balance at FSS_plus. Joe, it's been a great time, brother, and I hope you enjoy yourself over these next couple weeks, and we'll see who the Pirates pick.
Appreciate you, dude. I'm looking forward to being on your show after the draft or shortly thereafter. Keep doing good work.
Oh, appreciate it, man. Thank you.